the focus on number one, values so important. And they blew my mind with this idea of having a mission statement and a vision statement for your family. It makes total sense when someone says it, but who does that? And why don't we do that? A company's doing that to make sure that they're focused and they've got their eye on whatever they value.
Yes.
And we're not taught to do that. And now I'm like, why not? That's so important.
I love the piece about what they say about that freedom is the new wealth and that truth is the new sexy. Like the first time
Yes.
I read that, I kind of didn't get it, but
Yeah.
wow,
Truth is sexy.
after having the discussion with them, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I think it really is about evolving into relationships, right? It's evolving into yourself. It's no different than what we say on every other podcast, right? It's an inside job. If you're willing
Yeah.
to go and do that hard work, everything else will be well. That hard
Yeah,
work.
and doing your internal work and then coming together and doing it in this space of trust and vulnerability and knowing that your partner has your back and that you're each bringing your gifts, your feminine, your masculine, whether you're cisgender or in a heteronormal relationship or in a gay relationship or any other polyamorous, all the possibilities, still bringing this masculine and feminine energy, filling each other's places and creating this beautiful collaboration in your relationship and then in your family and then in your community and then in the world. Like this is going to just spread the love.
Yeah. Everybody's got to watch this one. It'll blow your mind.
Yeah, it's sexy.
It's sexy.
The world is a lot right now. Are you feeling it? We all need new tools to help us walk through the chaos with grace, ease, and compassion for each other and for ourselves. In this podcast, you'll hear from parents, educators, and other experts who can bring perspective to the monumental job of parenting. It's time to level up and be warriors for our kids and our communities. This is the Warrior Parent Podcast. I'm Marci Mitchell.
And I'm Debbie DiManno. As parents, we understand that it really does take a village to raise our kids. We hope that this podcast serves to create and support that community for you. Join us as we discuss and practice our core tools, which are proven mind-body techniques that can be used by anyone to improve your life on a daily basis.
Welcome back to the Warrior Parent Podcast. Thank you for joining us today. And today we are speaking with Matt Helm and Larissa Czuchnowsky, who came together doing the deep work that comes with loss, crushing grief, dark nights of the soul, healing, waking up, and listening to that still voice of truth within. After their first date, Matt and Larissa intuitively knew that something special was written in the stars for them. Their path eventually led to creating Relationships Thrive, where they share relationship expertise on love, sex, parenting, wealth, and more. They share over 50 years of combined experience in coaching, therapy, business, leadership, and education, and together hold certifications, licensures, and specializations in therapy and hypnotherapy, accelerated evolution, erotic blueprints, feminine embodiment, spiritual intelligence, health and wellness, and shamanic ceremony facilitation. Their mission is to offer a new paradigm for sacred, sexy, and committed relationships for the planet. The core values that direct them are integrity, freedom, love, honesty, devotion, intimacy, and service. They are committed to relationships thriving and believe that freedom is the new wealth and truth is the new sexy. So welcome, Matt and Larissa.
Thank you for that introduction.
Thank you.
Holy guacamole. I'm like, I listened to Marci. I'm like, where do we begin? Like, Matt and Larissa should be like every month, different topic. By the way, I need a little bit of all of those things in my life right now.
And everybody does.
Yes, life feels a little bit heavy right now, doesn't it? So, yeah. So I just a little note to everyone listening. So I became acquainted with Matt because he was a wrestler with my brother-in-law, who we call Chin. So, so back in the Michigan days, they were hardcore state wrestlers, state like championship, like the best wrestlers in high school, like ever. So, so anyway, don't mess with Matt.
And still are.
Yes, and still are. Yes. And Chin still's a fighter, by the way. So shout out to Chin. I know he's going to listen to the podcast today. So anyway, without further ado, like there's so many topics that we want to speak to you both about. And I'm just so excited that someone is doing this very thoughtful work because it is much needed on the planet right now. I think everyone listening is really struggling just to survive on the planet, let alone thrive and be in relationships. I know we wanted to start with, which was really important for Marci, to talk about core values. And somehow along the way, I think we have forgotten what that means to live into our values. So if you both could maybe start there, and then we'll see where we go.
Those core values you read to us, while you were reading them, I was thinking through my commitment to each one of them and how a lot of conflict happens in the world when people don't understand who they are and when they're not committed to who they are as a person. And if you don't do that for your own life and yourself, how can you ever offer yourself to another person? It's almost like there's no stability or no structure to reality, to what matters most,
Right.
which is what value is. It's like, you matter so much to me and I matter so much to myself that this value for well-being and health and freedom, they govern my reality. And I think that when you are not aligned with those values, it's a ripe opportunity for conflict to occur.
Yes.
Both within yourself and then the way that energetically interacts with your partner or in your life. For me, it's when there's something not aligned with freedom. So for example, if we were to talk about freedom, I'd say anytime I feel like something is out of alignment with my freedom, I get unsettled. And so it's like a barometer that we use around what matters most.
Yeah.
And it's not freedom from, it's that deep inner freedom. We can get like all stuck and balled up and, put in boxes. So it's like a deep flow, actually, this inner freedom. So it's not freedom from something.
Right.
And I think that it's really important. So much of what we do is about really coming first from our very known internal reality so that it is explored, it is conscious, understanding that there's parts that are still unconscious that we're working on. But our deep devotion and dedication to going really deep on our own and then with each other makes it so that it's very explicit, like what our values are. And not only that, but to be a successful family, you have to have your family values.
Yes.
So companies have mission statements, but for a couple to sit down and decide what are our values together as a couple, romantically, love making, discussion, vacation, learning, all of these things together. And then also as a family, like how we want our children to be happy and independent and kind and critical. So to make all of these values really explicit and important in life, we all can do it. But as you said earlier in our previous conversation, we're not taught about this. So just that deep intentionality in your relationship, in your family, and in your life, when you're being governed by that, it's really positive, and really that's how we thrive, by making things conscious.
Intentionality is a great word. And I love how you said that about a company having a mission statement. And yet, like, what's more important in our lives than our families, our spouses, our partners, and the idea that why don't we do that? Why don't we all sit down and intentionally identify our values, intentionally identify our family values, intentionally identify what our mission, our purpose is together, so that we're living in that very intentional way. I think that's like the most powerful thing that you just said. And yet it's not really something I've ever heard. Like, I've heard values, but the idea of a family mission statement, like that should be normal. That let's normalize that. But
Yes, and a vision statement. And
yes,
so
I love
part of what
it.
we do when we're working with couples, well, every father or man that I work with, but when we're working with couples, we actually have them sit down and clarify. It's amazing how you're in the minority if you sit down with your partner and say, what do you value? And what do
Yes.
I value? And I always have them whittle it down to 10 values that really matter to them, then 5. When you get down to your top 5 core values, you sit with each other in a very deliberate dyad or dialogue, and you co-create and you say, yes, yes, that one, yes, freedom, yes, love, yes, health and well-being, yes, intimacy, intimacy. And that's part of what we do as a couple is when you're, and it's interest-based negotiation. If you want to get into like a way that couples need to learn how to talk to each other.
And by the way, for those of you who are watching this on YouTube right now, those of you who can't see them, but the two of them, as they speak to each other, look at each other, look into each other's eyes, it is like it is pure, intention that they have just having this conversation with us. Like you guys probably do this all the time. This feels natural to you, but I don't know how many people are able to sit and look at each other and to have these conversations. Like it's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
Well, I can tell you, we invest deeply in our relationship. The time we put in conversations, the time we put in really deeply exploring how we interact together, like, oh, what is that touching inside of me? So it's not just like I'm externalizing and blaming him for
Right.
whatever it might be, but it's like my job, and we take it as each of our job to really explore, like, what is that part that's being touched?
Yeah.
And of course, that's the work that we do with couples too. So
Yes.
we live that.
So the core values, like when we're sitting down and saying, I really value my freedom. Freedom is the masculine essence. And having a talk with you about what freedom is, freedom from, freedom to, and how do we want to live that in our life? Well, I want to travel. First of all, I want to feel completely seen and known and free in who I am with you. And the responsibility we have to clean up anything that gets in the way of that, to keep the health of our relation, to keep our health, at the forefront so that we can be healthy to each other, is how you then sit with each other and come up with that vision of life together. It's like, because we're talking about a mission statement, but it's like, how do you see, if it would all be possible, how are we living our life?
Yeah.
I know that for me as an entrepreneur, I don't want to be strapped to an employer ever again.
Yeah.
And so how do we set our lives up, right? That's like, oh my God, you talk about bringing some prison bars down.
Yeah.
Just
Paradigm shift for sure.
Yes. Oh, and to say, how do we do this as a couple? How do we teach our kids that they do have this, even though they've gone through the schooling system and in a lot of ways been enslaved to the current matrix and current system? How do we model and inspire a shared vision for couples?
And with our children, how do we let them in on the fact that you are going to school, you are not your grade, this is a system, understanding the whole thing. This is what we do in this culture. You go, you get the degree, or, people don't have to get a degree either, but to really make explicit, that's I'd say another value of ours with our children, that we're making explicit, even when we're, if we're making decisions, like, we are making this decision, we are your parents, and it's because of this, you might not agree with it, but this is why. It's actually harder for us to like hold this boundary. We could just like let you do that.
Yes to that. Like, it's that point to kind of tell the kids that, yeah, it'd be easier just to let you do what you want, but holding this boundary is important, and here's why.
Well,
And just
it's intention setting, right? Like you have intentions for each other, so that they can see, like, oh, like mom and dad aren't just ignoring us right now. No, you have an intention for yourselves as a couple. I don't know that many children really understand that the most important part of keeping the family together is making sure that mom and dad are really healthy together, right? And for them to watch you do that, you're now modeling for them what a healthy relationship might be like, right? Setting priorities, setting boundaries around your own relationship. So it's not just kids, because they can take over everything, it always happens. The kids are out of the house and then mom and dad separate and leave because they don't have to hold that boundary anymore, right? But if they see you modeling these healthy boundaries, these healthy relationships, these healthy intentions, then they're going to go off and have their own healthy relationships, right?
Yeah, that's where I love the idea of parent warrior, that to hold those values and to hold the sturdiness around what matters most, which is that we're living embodiments of these values. And I think so many kids right now are not experiencing parents that are clear about who they are, what they stand for.
Yes.
And in these moments when you're parenting and modeling and working through challenges as a partnership, as a couple, to see that what true commitment really is. The commitment is to going all the way into yourself, intimacy, to cleaning up those wounded parts, to the kids have taught us more than I ever thought that I would teach them. And I think part of the paradigm is that parents need to shift their ways of thinking about their children. I can't tell you how much I've learned from my kids just this summer, from having them home for the summer.
Yeah.
And working through the camp.
Yeah, amen to that. We're all about listening to our kids, and we're very promotional of the younger generations and just giving parents permission to listen to them. I want to go back to something because I feel like this is a term that's really misunderstood, and I know you guys use this so freely. And even my husband and I will go back and forth about intimacy, right? So what is intimacy to you, and what is intimacy to you? Those can be very different things. So how do you guys describe intimacy for your relationship? And then also, I'm sure you have intimacy with your children, right?
Yeah.
So can you define that?
So for me, intimacy is to revealing, not concealing.
Yeah.
So that's both to myself. So like being really honest. And I can do that because there's nothing I want more than my greatest expansion. Like I'm here on this planet, I'm gonna do this. Like I'm not gonna play around. And so if I am graced with an amazing man, if I am graced with children, I'm gonna do my absolute best. If I'm graced with this life, I'm gonna like know it fully, and to make the decision that I'm not attached to my positions, I'm not attached to my ego, I'm not attached to, my beliefs, limiting, expanding, whatever. I know that I'm a growing, changing being, and that's just been my commitment. That's why we're attracted to each other. That's both of our commitments. And so taking responsibility for what's going on internally for me, sharing that, understanding, there's so many layers, because understanding how that works for him, understanding the timing, understanding how we might express that. But it's this ongoing conversation, this ongoing revealing of what's happening, and it's very honest. So really feeling the safety and being vulnerable with him.
Yes. I was just going to say that. It's also vulnerability. They're sort of interchangeable, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know that in the vulnerability, like we have been together, I know that in the tough places, there's like gold at the end of it. I know like that continuing and sharing, I know that it's just going to bring me more like knowledge, and it actually feeds the relationship when I'm really sharing my feelings and letting him in and trusting him enough to let him into those vulnerable places. And so that just breeds so much trust. And when I trust him, I just want to open even more. When I feel him, just his presence and his depth and his sturdiness, it just makes me want to like open and surrender and access these parts of myself, these feminine parts that in our culture, it's not taught to us. So we were having a conversation before, talking to the two of you about what that means, this polarity of relationship. But I'm gonna stop that and I'll get back to it.
Okay.
Let Matt.
speak to his definition of intimacy.
Yeah, I love the idea of into me see.
Mm.
And so
Oh,
to drop it all, to drop all of those masks of composure, to drop everything, to let her see the depth of who I am in my microscopic truth, completely emancipated from anything that is not who I am at the core of my beingness.
Yeah.
Which touches the infinite, right? It touches what we are in this infinite universe, incarnated on this planet, to let somebody else look at that part of me, which was so, as a warrior, fought for and earned and knocked to my knees, blood, sweat, and tears, to say, I will not let this world keep me from that gold.
Yeah.
The gold that is who I am at the core of who I am. And to let another person, then the vulnerability of letting another person see you raw and real. And sometimes it's not even raw and real when you've claimed it. Do you really care about what the external world thinks of you or feels about you when you're in that preciousness of the gold? And what happens with intimacy, in terms of, we call it alchemical friction. She rubs up against me and touches parts of me that need attention. The parts of me that emerge just because I'm in relationship with her and letting her see me, sometimes really young, immature parts of me that need to grow up and mature up. I could never do it without her. I could never do it without the feminine. So the idea of taking responsibility for the masculine in me, for that part of me that is present. We talk about love and flow, freedom and flow. And freedom is the masculine, presence, claim, penetrate. And the feminine is love and flow. And how do we regulate both of those within ourselves?
Oh my goodness. I love what you say. This is something I took from your website, but it says it's about the two things that we just spoke of. You say that freedom is the new wealth. So we talked a lot about freedom, and truth is the new sexy. And I think you both just nailed both of those things, which you so eloquently speak about.
I'd
Oh my
like to
goodness.
follow up a little bit on
Yeah.
what you just shared about the ability to be vulnerable and the good stuff that you find when you get to that place where you're both vulnerable and just state which probably is obvious, but what you have to have for that is deep trust so that you can go there. And so that has to be it's like you both have to be able to trust each other so that you can be that vulnerable. And then with that trust, it's there is a responsibility because someone has opened up and given you their, like you said, their raw self, their genuine self. And how do you handle that? Because you can't be, in your relationship, you have to value that and care for it because it can be, if you hurt the trust, if you don't honor it, now you've closed a door. So I would love to hear you talk a little bit about how you build that and what that looks like and how you get there to that level of trust.
I think this is where some of the masculine energy or emotional intelligence or spiritual intelligence, when you're co-creating reality together, being with each other, there's a level of presence that needs to be there. And in that presence, there's an opportunity for choice, right? So karma or the past comes in through the nervous system. All of our nervous systems have been wired. And so to acknowledge the fact that I'm not perfect when it comes to, because we can talk about this and it sounds really good.
Yeah.
But when we're in a moment where we have been triggered and that past has fully been touched our nervous system, and now we're not even barely conscious of what's coming up and we're communicating. So to be there and have one of us start the process of co-regulating when one of us, and to bring the microscope, what do we call it? The primal panic, when the primal panic kicks in.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And And one of you's in it, the other one needs to come out and acknowledge that something's going on here. That we are, one of us is triggered.
When we were talking about vulnerability, I was going to say, or intimacy, part of it is I know Matt's highest. He knows mine.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to spiral down. It's really easy to get in our stories. He did this, or if only he was like this, or whatever those things are.
Yes.
And so in the intimacy, it's the spiritual practice. What we're talking about, you go on meditation retreats and you're like, focus it. This is a spiritual practice. It's a decision.
Yeah.
And so you're very present with yourself and you
Mhm.
have trust because you trust yourself. You've explored and you're working on exploring, or you have a teacher, a mentor, or a coach to continue exploring. And so you have a deep trust of yourself so that when we are in these places, which Matt and I have hard conversations all the time. We don't shy away from them.
Mm.
We have skills, we have tools, which is what we teach to couples. But we have hard conversations all the time, and we have tools that we practice. And that's what we teach to couples that we work with as well. Because if you're not having hard conversations, you are just living like an okay life together, not rocking the boat.
Right.
And that's fine. I mean, if that's your choice, that's okay. But that's
Yeah.
not what we're choosing. We're choosing like passion and love and deep, presence and our greatest expansion. So what we find often in our hard conversations, when we're speaking honestly, when we're sharing, when we trust each other, even though sometimes like we might think the other person is like, we're triggered by them.
Yes.
Whatever
Here
it
we
might
go.
be.
Yes.
Just knowing back to the values, knowing what our value is, knowing our intention, holding that person. And sometimes we say whoever is the first one, like to get to the end of the pool first, or like hit the button. Whoever is the first one gets the prize. Whoever can like regulate themselves
Yeah.
and like take a breath
Yeah.
and like not be reactive. And there's practices that we do for that too. That is really beautiful. Like when you can, in the midst of something, like repivot.
Yes.
Hold the space.
Because the commitment is to going all in, all the way to the edge of reality and saying, I will meet you right there on the edge of evolution. I don't know exactly where we're going in terms of how we're growing and evolving, but I'll go right there. And it's scary, but I will go there. And in terms of eroticism and these places where you might not be completely free. This is what I found too with couples. Larissa, when I was doing the erotic blueprint training with Jaya, my mentor and coach, Larissa kind of did it side by side, right? She did the whole curriculum with me. And it's a place where I found that most couples are not completely free erotically. They're not telling the truth. They're not asking for what they want. And so to provide a place as a man, to provide a place for a woman to come, knowing she's been wounded and harmed by the culture and told that she could not express herself in this beautiful way, tantrically, erotically, to say, bring it all.
Yeah.
Bring every bit.
Oh my God. So I just want to, there's just something that I need to ask you. And I think we're right at the point where I think this is so relevant, but the younger generations right now, the Gen Zs, the millennials, like, I feel like they are so confused about what does it mean to be erotic? What does it mean to be sexual? What does it mean to be vulnerable? They have learned sex from the internet. Right?
Yeah.
Like this is a very difficult time. And Marci and I both have, kids in their 20s and 30s, and man, they are struggling right now. They are struggling. And I'm wondering, like, how do you help them? I mean, not everyone can come and hang out with Matt and Larissa. And how do we help these kids, to understand these very big subjects that you're talking about? This is heavy, heavy stuff. How do you talk to a 30-year-old and a 20-year-old about these things?
Sure. So my approach has been to have constant conversations. And so to, like if there's a book, if it's hard for you to be direct with your child, maybe you leave a book, or maybe you have some person talking and like, oh, listen to this. But in my family, as you might guess, I'd be very direct talking about things. And so
Yes, of course.
having these constant conversations with my son, who's now 19, and we're living a life where we are having these conversations ourselves, because we all live in an ecosystem. We are all affected by how sexuality is fed to us.
Yes.
And so by us kind of sorting things out, and there are very beautiful practices, which we can talk about in a moment, as we embody and model ourselves in our home and use opportunities to have conversations and live with our values, so that when something comes up, we can kind of turn things around and like show them. And our kids too, if they haven't had this, also need a space where they can be intimate, where they can be vulnerable, where it's not shamed, where you're making it a space
Yes.
where these things can be talked about. Like, it's hard, like when I was your age, this is, what happened to me. That's what I have to say for now.
Yeah. For us, well, my generation, it was all just very shameful, right? Like you just don't talk about it. There was some religious connotations about it. There was no one talking about intimacy or healthy sex, or it was non-existent. It was non-existent. And so is that part of how we're now getting to this point of having these generations of kids, because we didn't have the appropriate conversation. We didn't know how to talk about it. We were shamed to not talk about it ever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a part of the emancipation and the freedom journey and the essential reclamation of self has this erotic, this sexual reclamation. And unfortunately, it's a scary place for people to go when you've been disconnected from your own body.
Yes.
My God, this innate, beautiful, amazing carrying case of a body that we have that is sexual, that wants to make love, wants to reproduce, right? There's a reason there's 8 billion people on the planet.
Lots of sexy time.
There's a lot of sexy time, and there could be a lot more sexy time.
Yes.
Can you imagine what the world would look like if people were in their truth and expressing themselves, and that it were a valuable part of the human existence that was talked about? It breaks my heart that at the ages of 23 and 20 with my daughters, 2 of them, and that we have a 10-year-old too, that I'm talking right now about the way culture is imposing upon her the objectification of her body. And that I want to be very careful and take responsibility for this as a leader for our planet, because it's beautiful. Our sexuality is beautiful. Who you are in your truth, when you learn how to tell the microscopic, intimate, vulnerable truth of who you are to a partner, to yourself, to have your own self-pleasuring practice. Eroticism is the way you're wired for pleasure. I like walking in the woods. That's like an erotic time for me, outside in the sun, next to the ocean. And so that, I think, is missing in our world. And I think it's one of the reasons we have high levels of anxiety, high levels of depression, people who don't know who they are, people who are confused because it's not being taught and not being honored. And where are the elders in our culture who hold this, right? And take responsibility for our people.
Yeah, and there's a whole darker side too of, sexual abuse, pedophilia, a lot of sexual abuse things that can happen to people in youth and then spiral. And part of part of what keeps it going is the shame and the silence and the darkness. And so we do have to bring these things out and talk about them. And I actually think the youth do a better job of it than my generation does. I know like my 20 somethings, and I hear 30, like my 30 and 40 somethings who I think are better at it, better at talking about it, better at it's less stigmatized.
I have a lot of faith. I think that at the same time, there's this, it seems like there's more darkness, you know, and with screens and what's happening to sexuality. I think there's a real groundswell and real movement of people reclaiming their bodies, of reclaiming the erotic, which is simply put life force. You go outside, the sun, it's pleasure, it's sensuality, it's our birthright. We have skin. Going outside, feeling the breeze, feeling this.
Love it. Yes.
Yeah. Amen to that.
You know, enjoying washing your fruit in the sink, enjoying cutting it, you know, like if you look at nature, it's juicy, it's like gorgeous. It's a, you know, there are flowers everywhere. And so I think sexuality has almost been distilled to a caricature of what it can be. And so part of the practice that we engage in, this polarity practice, it's sexuality or eroticism or life force energy as a beautiful practice between two people. We are not taught this whatsoever. And so there's a certain energetic. Parents can often just be the same energy, their friend energy. But if you know these secrets of really like embodying, like for me, like really being in my body, not this kind of neutral, working mom kind of idea, which I can get into when I want to, but actually, which women I feel have been conditioned out of this feminine, sensual, pleasure, flow, enjoyment, ease, relaxation, openness, invitation. And so my practice, my daily practice is like holding this energy. And so Matt, his practice is being that depth, being that presence, being sturdy, which then just makes me melt even more. And it's such an exquisite, it's so exquisite.
That was beautifully expressed. That like
Matt,
that we all were right there with you in that.
Well, Matt, done, like I get it while you're into Larissa right now. Like,
I was just into her. Like, I'm on camera and I'm like, okay.
We all want a lot more of that.
Yes, like, but we have to, we have to practice it. It's our birthright, and we've been so conditioned out of it. So that's the work of Matt and I do feminine embodiment. You know, he's a men's coach. We both work with couples. It is our passion to emancipate people, to turn people on to what their birthright is. We can all be having this outrageous, mind-blowing, full body, ecstatic, connected to like the earth and heavens moments. We can all have it, and it's not that hard. We just don't know how to do it. And we're kind of oriented in the wrong way. So for me, for my children, you know, our children have come to retreats or different cacao ceremonies or different things that we do to offer them some gifts, but most importantly, who we are and the conversations that we have with them and the energy between us speaks so much.
Yes, that's true. It's the what you walk the walk, and that's always what comes through the strongest.
The inside job, as Marci and I say. It's always an inside job. Oh my goodness, you guys. I feel like we're running out of time. Marci, do you want to?
I want to do a couple things. I want to first we're doing something new this starting this month of August at the Warrior Parent Podcast, and we're coming in with themes for each month. And August's theme is women's equality. And so, just real quick to kind of close out today's wonderful interview, I just want to ask each of you, and you can each answer in turn, what woman is inspiring you today? So go ahead, decide who's going to go first, and just let us know who that is.
I'll start because she's right on my mind. And she's a figure that lived long ago, but Mary Magdalene.
That's so funny. I was going to say her too.
Oh, you two are in tune.
Wow. Wow.
Well, I just commented on yesterday was like a day devoted to Mary Magdalene, and I chimed in on a post, and Larissa exposed me to a book called Mary Magdalene Revealed. And
Oh, someone just mentioned that to me the other day.
Oh,
yes,
Amazing.
and it was one of those books that you read, but it actually touched my soul. And I feel like I got a sense of what she stood for and how honored she was by Christ during her time. And so the idea that Larissa is Mary Magdalene, Larissa is the feminine embodiment in this world, that almost all of my clients, I have recommended that they read Revealed or Mary Magdalene Revealed, because she so stood for love and the embodiment of love. And as a man who has a feminine side, who has a feminine heart, she's a model for how to move with that energy in the world.
wow.
So that's my, that's
Beautiful.
mine.
Beautiful.
Larissa?
Well, I'll just say one more point about her, and then I'm going to say something different. But really, her work is about how do we ground the divinity, the like cosmic consciousness in the human body. And so just kind of a pathway to do that. And I think I'm just going to say the feminine archetypes, the 13 archetypes that I'm thinking of, the embodiment of the feminine that I think is starting to rise up more as women. We're starting to have the flavors, the textures of who we can be and how we can be in the world are being revealed to us. And so, may we all embody that more. And with our men, may we be like this for ourselves, our family, for our men, and for our men to continue to learn to be sturdy and present and hold that space. That was one thing I wasn't able to say in families, just the importance of the polarity together, to having a sturdy father, sturdy masculine, whether you're a same-sex couple or not, like just this deep embodiment, which then allows the other partner, in my case, me, to kind of open to my gifts together. So
It's beautiful.
Wow.
Well,
Okay,
let's
I
take
can
a
read the book.
moment for you to share with us so you're in Michigan. How can people work with you if they're listening to this and saying, yes, please? Go ahead.
Yeah, so they can reach us through matthelmcoaching.com, and wisdomheartcoaching.com is Larissa's, and through our Relationships Thrive, which is the business that we do together. And
So
I think it's easiest.
Are those the workshops then that you guys do, the larger workshops? Is that where you do those? Okay.
Relationshipsthrive.org. We will put all these links in the show notes. What were you going to say? So.
I think it's easiest to Matt Helm Coaching also, because he's really checking that. And we do have an event coming up in October. It's a one-day polarity immersion. So what we're talking about in terms of this energy work between two partners, that we're going to be teaching on this in a one-day immersion.
And is that virtual or is that in person?
It's in person, but we're exploring the notion of virtual.
Yeah.
And I would just say too,
where is that where will that be in person?
That will be in Farmington Hills, Michigan.
Okay. for anyone who's
Yeah.
listening, you're close by.
And I want to say we also do kind of VIP experiences for couples, and to get a sense of a couple or parents that are falling apart, that Larissa and I have found that most couples are ending their relationships prior to doing the work.
Mhm.
They're not awake.
Yeah.
And there are consequences for families. A lot of divorces and ending of partnerships, they actually don't have to happen. It's because the hardest work is acknowledging and addressing the real problem, which is inside of you, that inner work
Yeah.
you're talking about.
Yeah.
So the best way to work with us is in a 3-day, 2 or 3 day, where as accelerated evolution, we help remove the trauma and the false and the karma from the system, you know, in a very short amount of time.
And we teach so many tools, and we do polarity work, and it is the deepest weekend you can have as a couple that, you know, will open up new avenues. We just finished with a couple with young children recently who are on the brink of divorce,
Oh.
and now they're more in love than ever because so much of what's going on is the unconscious parts of us, you know, wanting love, wanting attention, wanting to be seen, so we love that work.
Yeah.
Deep dive.
And is that in person?
That's the experience. Yes.
That's in person. So
That's
usually
in person
people,
also.
well, yeah, we can fly out to people. So we fly out to couples if they have a place, to their homes and work with them, or they come to Michigan.
Wow.
And we do all of this on Zoom. So the couple that we just talked about, I think it's important that they find us.
Yeah.
And the initial meeting is usually Zoom. And when we start working with them, Larissa pairs off with the woman, I pair off with the man. We do all of the release of the charge, and then we bring them together. And we do a mago, and we do dyads, and we teach them how to effectively communicate.
So can you do this work on Zoom too, all of it, or it's
All of
just
it.
part of it? You can do it all.
You can do it all on Zoom.
That's great.
It's different,
That
right?
obviously it obviously opens it up for a lot of people in other places. So that's good to know.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so what it does is that the couple then came to us after 2 or 3 months of Zoom work. The way that we work is sometimes I take the wife, sometimes I take the feminine, so she can feel what it feels like to have a sturdy masculine put his arms around her to do the work.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
sometimes Larissa takes the man to feel that feminine. And then we bring them together. And then there's an invitation to come work in person, because that is really where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's 2 programs. That's like 3 months with an immersion, or we just do immersions too.
I just hate to see people give up. They give up because to do this deep inner work is the
Yeah.
hardest thing that they will ever do in their
It's
existence.
hard. And you may not even know about it. So it's great that we're talking about it, because maybe there's someone listening today who can be like, wow, maybe there's some hope. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think
Nothing
you guys,
like it. Yep.
yes, I think you guys have given us all hope for relationships. We have not delved much into this in past podcasts, but I can see that we could have a lot more podcasts with you and go even deeper. But anyway, I'm super grateful for you guys' time.
Yeah.
I know you have a lot going on right now. I think they're having a big party in their backyard. They gracefully did this with us today, so we love you guys, and I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for the work that you both are doing with Parent Warrior, because
So-
we really need more parents to take that warriorship and claim that responsibility more fully for their kids, for their lives.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
And now for your core mental health break. This is your opportunity to take a moment to support your mental wellness, your peace of mind, your own ease and grace. Take some time every day to support your mental health. You deserve it, and it matters. So now I encourage you to place your feet flat on the floor. If you happen to be outside, I encourage you to take your shoes off and put your feet into the ground, feeling that grounding energy. If you're inside or somewhere where you don't want to take your shoes off, that's okay too. You can still put your feet flat on the ground and feel into Mother Earth. Receive a deep breath in through your nose. Fill your lungs and your belly. And then release that breath. Today, let's open ourselves up to guidance, to our intuition, to what we are meant to know today. Sit in silence for just a moment and allow any insight, any ideas, any inspiration to just drop in. And when it does, sit with it. Keep yourself from immediately doubting or denying or saying, "Oh no, that's not for me." If it dropped in, it's meant to be looked at. Take a moment and look at it. Sometimes things will come in later when you open your mind. If something doesn't drop in right now, no worries. Just stay open. Thank you for pausing for yourself today. Your mental health is important, and you deserve peace, calm, and ease in your life every day. So please choose to receive it. It is always available right at your center, your heart, your core. Stay well, friends.
Thanks for listening to the Warrior Parent Podcast, which is a production of our nonprofit, Cour Experience, who also creates and distributes Cour tools. You can find us at courexperience.org. Make sure you join us next week for another informative conversation to help you and your family show up mindfully, purposefully, and joyfully with each other and in your community.
Our Cour Tools platform consists of a number of proven tools and techniques that are designed to reduce stress, anxiety, and overwhelm in spite of what's going on in your world. We want to thank Samuel Hale, LLC, for sponsoring this podcast. Technical and marketing support comes from Inspire Your Brand. Our podcast editor is Justin Beeden. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of the hosts, the producers, or the financial supporters. I'm Debbie DiManno.
And I'm Marci Mitchell. Thanks for listening. If you resonate with the idea of creating a community to help support kids and families, won't you join us by following the podcast and sharing this episode? You can even write a review. It truly does take a village, and we appreciate you.